And you said it very eloquently. The confirmation was that we simply took the near-term prognostication that a potential for a rate hike is off the table at this point in time. I think more contextually, we have to really understand that we have celebrated a lower inflation rate, the market has. But in context at Pimco, we're specifically thinking about the longer-term trajectory of how the Fed's going to react to this data. More importantly, when you look and decompose what's going on within the segments of the CPI and the PCE, the more prevalent inflation indicator for the Federal Reserve, it still remains relatively resilient. In fact, to get below a 3% number in those core figures, we're going to have to see prints over the course of the remainder of the year of 0.2% or lower. Right now, we're still well above that. And so from the prognostication we saw yesterday, yes, perhaps it's some relief upon a higher inflation print. But in the context of getting closer to that Federal Reserve target that they want to get to so quickly, it's probably unlikely at this point in time.
The great element about this point of the cycle is that there's something in it for the hawks and the doves. You can pick any piece of data to support your argument, pretty much. The bad news is it's not giving us any clarity. And if you look at picking up the data, cost of shelter, including rents, 0.4%. That was up for the third straight month. Right. Gasoline shooting up as well. So these two categories constituting 70% of the increase in CPI. Couldn't you get a change that if those rental prices start to come down, gasoline prices also, if we start to see a fade here on slower economic demand, then surely we get self-correcting numbers in a big component here.
Yeah, I mean, people would call that opportunistic disinflation in a lot of ways. And that's something that actually the Federal Reserve contemplated back in the 1990s. I think from the perspective, what we need to be thinking about is if, in fact, disinflation has derailed. What I mean by that is perhaps inflation is actually stickier for a longer period of time, and the contributing factors, whether services, core, or just simple wage pressures, are more prolonged in this situation, which probably means that the Federal Reserve is data dependent. You said there's something for the doves and the hawks. The reality, that's called data dependency. And so what we're really here celebrating is the fact that, yes, in the near term, inflation has come down slightly, but in the context of the Fed comfort zone, the landing zone is a long way off at this point in time. Yeah. From a practical perspective, it means rates are going to be higher in the United States for longer than people have suspected.
I appreciate there's a trajectory, Jerome, and you've covered that amply with Karen already. But the trajectory, as I think you've tried to explain, well, you have explained very clearly, it's so slow, there isn't necessarily a landing zone to get to where the Fed wants to get to yet as well. Do you see a scenario, and I don't know what the official Pimco line is at the moment, but do you see a scenario where there are a high probability scenario where there is no rate cut this year in the States?
We probably put that in the realm of 25 to 30% where there's no rate cut. It's realistic that there is no rate cut at this point in time. And while we don't think the election or the politics become a factor in the timing of that, yeah, we do think that you don't necessarily have enough data, enough ammunition to really make that call in June or July of this year. So it probably gets pushed out perhaps to September, but a sequential rate cut scenario where you get two rate cuts is probably again a low probability event as well. So you might get one as a symbolic gesture to the market, but I think more importantly as you get into 2025, which seems a long way off at this point in time, but in reality, especially for a fixed income practitioner, it's pretty near. We don't necessarily think some of those rate cuts materialize at that point in time.